Hello, everyone. Oh, you know what's going on here? Hello. There we go. There we go. We were getting double sound there for a second. Welcome, everyone, to another live episode of Lou Reviews, the destination for critical thinking in the realm of the unexplained. Please don't forget to smack that like, share, subscribe buttons, including the almighty bell, which will remind you every time we go live. If you really want to support the show, of course, check out our link, our Patreon link in the description below. That really goes a long way. Today, we're going to be talking to, I invited Chris back, just because, he's just putting out such great stuff, man, when it comes, especially the ICIG complaint, the technicalities of it, who's doing what. He's really dissecting it nicely. So we're going to talk to him again today about that. Ooh, you know what? The music's probably pretty loud. There we go. Sorry, guys. Hopefully you heard everything I said. So anyway, we're going to be slicing that. And then second half of the show, we'll be talking about Rob Heatherly, Matt Ford, and the shenanigans that they're pulling. So we pulled some shenanigans back, and I think it struck a chord. And I think it struck a chord for a good reason, because there's usually truth in comedy. So we'll dive into that in a little bit. So without further ado, let's go ahead and switch up views here. Let's bring in Chris. Chris, what is shaking, my man?
Hey, Lou, how's it going?
It's going very, very well. Just turning down some music here. How you doing?
Doing well, man. Can't complain. It's a little chilly down here where I'm at, but it's a good start to the week so far. So thank you for having me back on, by the way. I appreciate that.
No, pleasure's all mine. I want to say hello to everyone in the chat. TJ Felony, Wise Monkey, Fifi Barboa, SL, Simon Fly. Let's see here. Pat Calabria. Yo, what's going on? Morty Matt. Aunt Edna. Hey, how you doing? Yoshi. Welcome. Okay. So, Chris, let's just dive right into it. I've got pulled up here. Of course, I've bookmarked it, like I always bookmark the things I want to talk about. Your little sort of statement here that you put out today when it comes to David Grusch and his legal representation, Compass Rose Legal Group, that is Charles McCullough is his attorney. And this has been used a lot with as far as telling the story of David Grusch and what he's been doing, and you know how much credibility this law firm adds to this idea that he's revealed to the ICIG about alien craft and secret programs and yada yada, and it doesn't really mean that technically. So let's get into it, man. I was gonna read this. I don't know, what do you want to call this? I guess like a post. This is a legitimate post. This is like a 5-6 paragraph post. I shouldn't read it. That's why I brought you on, right? Like I've already read it once, but let's talk to you. Like break this down for us. What are you saying here when it comes to Christopher Mellon, Dave Grusch, the law firm Compass Rose, and Dave McCullough, right? Dave McCullough?
Yeah.
No,
is it Dave McCullough? No, it's Charles McCullough.
Charles McCullough.
So I kept seeing people posting about Charles McCullough, being the first voted inspector general to the intelligence community, and how credible that makes David Grusch seem. And of course I've gone into multiple times about the inspector general of the intelligence community complaint and the reprisal complaint, and what that really means versus what people are trying to make it out to be. So I keep looking into it, and I found some things that popped up. One, talking about Charles McCullough, like I said, he was the first voted inspector general of the intelligence community. but it's a little odd that if you go on the Soul Foundation's website, he's also the I guess what you would call the legal guidance or the legal advisor to
Mm-hmm.
the Soul Foundation.
Yeah.
And what's really weird is when you're on that website, it lists Gary Nolan and the others associated with the company, but it doesn't list David Grusch. But on David Grush's resume, it shows that he is the COO of the Soul Foundation, and that's current. So it's a little odd why David Grusch isn't on the website, but it's on his resume. But Charles McCullough, regardless, is representing both. To me, what that sounds like, if David Grusch is actually on the staff there with the Soul Foundation, like he has on his resume that he turned into Congress, then that would mean that Charles McCullough most likely is representing David Grusch because that is the technical legal advisor for the Soul Foundation.
Right.
So I'm not entirely sure this is something that Charles McCullough and him are buddies, and he believes in David Grusch and come out just to represent him. To me, if I look at just what I can see out there and just put away all the noise, it sounds like to me that McCullough would be representing Grusch even after Compass Rose made their statement in fulfilling their what they stated they were going to do for Grusch and representing him. And so McCullough stuck on. Everybody made a big deal about that. But it looks to me that this is because the Soul Foundation has him as legal advisor, and Grusch is on the Soul Foundation, so he gets that access to McCullough. That's where I see it.
Got it. So
So
it's like it's almost like a 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon
a little bit,
sort of
right?
thing. Yeah.
Yeah, so because everybody makes a big deal about it, on the other, we call the other side enthusiasts, but it's important to understand that there's actually a connection there that's more so based on his employment with Soul Foundation and his role there versus, just McCullough coming out on his free will just to represent Grusch. And I think that was something that was put out there and may have been, mistaken or exaggerated because I see it a different way. So that kind of goes into the Compass Rose issue.
Right.
So I made this post earlier, and it was more so to start a long article and just going over what the ICIG means and their scope of their investigation and why they would be doing that and why the House Oversight Committee would be involved with this versus somebody was talking about the Intelligence Committee and stuff like that. And then, so in that, I remembered the statement put out by Compass Rose. And so I went to their website to try to find that statement. That statement is no longer there,
Right.
which is interesting, right? So if you go to their website, they have statements that go all the way back to, I guess, 2019, 2018. So it's pretty interesting. So I had to go to the debrief. Unfortunately, they
Interesting.
still have it up. Yep.
Interesting.
They
Yeah.
still, but yeah, when I Googled it, that's what popped up, and I was like, all right, well, I can't really find it anywhere else. I go to their page where they reported on this, and it had a link to the page. And just to double check, I clicked the link, and it takes me there to Compass's site, and there it's not there. So, but what I wanted to point out, and this is very important because people are making such a big deal about representation by Compass Rose and Charles McCullough to the for Rush to the ICIG. That's how he filed the complaint.
Right.
So but I think it would be worth going into reading what the actual statement is that was made by Compass Rose because people can no longer find it unless you go to that specific debrief article. So do you have a question about that?
Well, no, I'm actually on the Compass Rose Legal Group website. And the very first page, it's just so people can get a sort of an idea of who they represent. So Compass Rose Legal Group has a diverse practice area tailored to prospective, current, and former civilian federal employees, defense contractors, members of our active duty and reserve military journalists, and corporations. The firm's foundation rests on its proven experience and professionalism while zealously providing legal representations for its clients. Notably, its attorneys are uniquely qualified to perform in these areas, having years of experience working on such matters within federal government as well as the private sector. So they just pretty much any sort of represent federal employees essentially.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically what it sounds like. That's the only type of clientele they'll take. Hence why McCullough would be one of the attorneys on staff, because that would be, obviously, if you look into his background, with his in the intelligence community being the inspector general, he's going to be one of the, foremost voices there. And
Right.
that's why they would have him on staff.
So then let me ask why, because I'm looking at the Soul Foundation. I just had that website up as well. And like on this, I'm looking at Gary Nolan, Peter Scoffish, and Jonathan Burt, who's just been added. That's a new name that I haven't seen there. And it's also funny that they've also added Tim Galladay, Avi Loeb, and Diana Pasulka. Wow. Of course they have. Of course they have, because these three are also on the Americans for Safe Aerospace Foundation as well. Thank you, Wise Monkey, for the $2.99 super chat. Let me let's see, what did you say here? Oh wait, I gotta pop it up. There we go. Sorry, this pop-up chat thing is just like not working very well. Oh, it's like a little emoji. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Thumbs up emoji. Thank you. So yeah, it's just funny that, like these guys, the same guys, man. I promise you, Ryan Graves is coming. Like Ryan Graves is coming to the Soul Foundation one way or the other, so that way they could both sort of be like two different foundations with the same people, knocking on the doors of lawmakers, being like, "Hey, could we talk to you about setting aside some money for foundations like ours?"
Yeah, I mean, and I wouldn't be surprised if Christopher Mellon doesn't jump on board sometime soon. Because Soul Foundation is a nonprofit, so they're looking for investors and people to obviously donate money to build this thing up. And I mean, I think it's pretty common knowledge by now where Christopher Mellon comes from. So I wouldn't be surprised if you see him on there eventually.
Well, okay, so you're saying David Grusch is in this foundation, but he's not listed here on the board.
Correct.
And I guess my question is, Compass Rose really just represents, like we said, federal employees. So who else other than Timothy Galladay is a federal employee and Dave Grusch?
That's a good question. So I don't think anybody else on there.
I'm reading Jonathan Burt's profile here. He's the board of directors at European Union and Technology and Investment Advisory Boards. Jonathan Burt is the founder chairman of the board and the driving force behind RoboVision, a leading AI solution provider on account of their deep learning platform, RVAL, with expertise applied physics and image processing. He's well known for developing tailored solutions for machine vision and robotics. I mean, that sounds like a government contracted employee, maybe. Like robotics. Jonathan's philosophy of building, applications. The hard way has elevated RoboVision software, making it powerful and user-friendly across diverse markets. Beyond RoboVision, Jonathan is a regular lecturer at instructions such as the London School of Economics, Valeric Business School, and Ghent University. He shares his insights on AI and related topics through a bi-weekly column in the Détige, Belgium's top financial newspaper. As a regular speaker at the events of TEDx, he inspires and educates audiences on the latest advancements in artificial intelligence, machine vision, and robotics. Jonathan serves on the Soul Foundation's board of directors, chair of the European Union Advisory Board, and serves on the Technology and Investment Advisory Board. So that's a new guy. I mean, according to that little sort of breakdown of Jonathan Burt, that sounds, would you say, possibly a government employee that maybe... how many government employees do you think this foundation has to have for Compass Rose to come in and be like, okay, yeah, we'll rep you guys?
Yeah, I'm not really sure if there is any kind of requirement, to be honest. It'd be hard to say because it'd be speculating. But I mean, if you look at the current, especially on the advisory board, I mean, you obviously got one veteran that I'm sure that's got he's probably maybe working as a contractor right now.
Mm-hmm.
You got Avi Loeb, who, as you well know that by now that, he's with what Galileo Project, but they're under investigation.
They are under
Yeah.
investigation by the FBI.
FBI, yeah. So I mean,
Yeah.
so you probably got some of these guys like Jonathan Burt I'm sure maybe work with some kind of government contracting and stuff like that. So these things would be a pretty good spot for Charles McCullough to navigate through and represent them if anything comes up. But if you look on the website again, like you see all these names and Tim Galladay and everybody, but you don't see David Grusch, who,
Right.
like I said, I pulled up the resume and it shows it right here. He's the chief operating officer at the Soul Foundation, managing day-to-day operations. So, it's pretty interesting. And then you go into the fact, like I said, that that Compass Rose no longer has that statement on their website after they supposedly fulfilled their requirement in representing Grusch in the ICIG complaint. So I don't know. I don't know. I would assume that it fits the need for Charles McCullough to be there, and that's probably why he's there. And he's probably a little bit of a believer himself, right? You have to believe a little bit, I think, to be a part of the Soul Foundation, or what would even be the point.
I would agree.
So,
well, it doesn't say anywhere here in his bio, at least not on the Soul Foundation for Charles McCullough, anything about Compass Rose.
Which is odd, but because
Right.
if you look on Compass Rose's website, he's still on there. It looks like he's still on the staff. So this might be an independent thing. I don't know. I'm assuming maybe you could do that.
Could I throw a pitch, an idea out there?
Sure.
Maybe he's left Compass Rose and they haven't updated the website, and they have the Compass Rose Association by attorney because his name's still on the website. But he's representing himself here. Or, I mean, it is weird that why wouldn't you put that as a bona fide in your bio for this foundation?
Right. And if you look through there, let's see, I don't see anything in the Soul Foundation about him representing David Grusch.
Nothing. Yeah.
Right. And we know that David Grusch is their cash cow right now. Well, I don't know. Pasulka just, apparently sold out all of her books, hardcover and everything after Joe Rogan. But Grusch is that guy. Like Grusch is like, hey, I'm the whistleblower guy, and it's kind of shocking he doesn't put anything up there about that at all.
Have you ever seen the show Hell's Kitchen?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I feel like what might be happening here is sort of like a Hell's Kitchen of who's going to win the UFO contract. There's only going to be one, and all of these guys, like, I feel like Grusch has sort of fell flat on his face. He was the superstar. He was the guy who everybody thought was going to win the Hell's Kitchen prize. But instead, he falls on his ass, and the unsuspecting Diana Pasulka comes in and steals the fucking show. Because I feel like I listened to the Joe Rogan interview with her, and it's just funny how she puts out these things. She just says things with no facts connected to them. But she says them with this philosophical and social science, background. And all of a sudden she's got like this juice. I don't know. I can't explain it, but it's almost like what they did with these podcasters, with all these podcasters. They sort of just filtered out and they said, okay, let's see which of the four are going to be able to carry the message. Okay, they're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There they are. And we'll select a couple of them to really sort of be the mouthpiece for this shit. And I think it's let's see who we can get on Joe Rogan as sort of like, that's the test. That's the barometer. Let's throw him on Rogan and see, let's see what sticks. And she's sticking for some reason. I think he didn't stick with David Grusch, but I think Diana Pasulka, obviously she's sold out on all her books, which is good for you, Diana Pasulka. Good for you.
Well, that helps a little bit too, right? Like if you're Joe Rogan, like you didn't really know anything much about Grusch other than he came out with this stuff and he showed up on your podcast. And like I just watched, what's his name? Jimmy Corsetti I think it's his name. I just watched that episode where he was on there talking about Atlantis, and
Yeah.
you see like the difference in like how Joe Rogan is completely engaged from the very start with that podcast. And if you go back and you look at Grush's, he's just sitting there like, huh.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
It's
like
the least interactive I've seen Joe Rogan on a podcast. And I've watched a lot of Rogan. I've listened to a lot of Rogan.
Right.
And that was one of the least sort of interactive where he's like trying to poke the bear, you know, like being genuinely curious. I think that's what Rogan does very well is being genuinely curious, or at least used to do very well. But in that interview, I didn't hear much of that at all. I was just like, I felt like, because he also, and he eats dinner with his guests the night before, because they've got to stay overnight to go do his podcast most times, because they're coming in from out of town. So they usually go to like either a really nice steak dinner, or Joe cooks something or some bullshit, and he sort of warms them up or sort of gets a feel for them at that dinner, and then they do the show the next day. And so that way they've got a little bit of rapport. It's a little more comfortable for the guests than for him. And I think Joe knew after that conversation, after maybe that steak dinner, I'm just speculating here, but after that steak dinner, I think he was like, yeah, this is bullshit. Like, I'm not going to get anywhere
the
BS
BS with this meter. It was pegging, right?
Yeah.
You could just, it was the feel, right? And you know, and I'm not trying to sit here and just insinuate that that's what it was, but if you, like you said, if you watch or listen to enough of Rogan, like the episode I watched today, from the time that the video started, Joe was all about it, man. He was sitting like this and he was asking questions right off the bat, and I just feel like that we didn't get the same energy on the Grusch interview. And then, of course, he followed up a couple of episodes later when he was talking about it briefly. You know, he said something to the like of, you know, maybe Grusch is just like maybe they used him as a useful idiot or whatever. So who knows, you know, but it is quite interesting, and especially with what Kirkpatrick has dropped lately. And then you see the MSM, right? The mainstream media is starting to, it seems like, report more on the skeptical side of this than they are, you know, pro. Right, we're hearing outside of the echo chamber of the News Nation, the Hill, you know, what else? Liberation Times and Daily Mail, like, you know, the normal news sources that create the echo chamber on UFO Twitter. But we're seeing that stuff outside now, and mainstream media is picking it up, and it doesn't seem like it's gaining the speed that they thought it would, just to be honest.
I agree with you. Just because there was I had it open earlier. I forgot. Man, I wish I had kept it open, because it was, I think The Guardian had put an article out quoting the podcast from Kirkpatrick. Basically, it was everything Kirkpatrick said, all the juicy quotes from Kirkpatrick in The Guardian. And I was like, oh man, finally, like, yeah, okay, this is starting to hit mainstream. But what was funny, and I was going to talk about later, but I guess we could kind of talk about it now, is Stephen Greenstreet earlier today had said that he had reached out to Kirkpatrick. And it's funny, Stephen made a meme of Kirkpatrick, and it says, Kirkpatrick responds to Greenstreet, quote, "My apologies, but I have not read your work."
I know.
So funny, man. Like, that's why I really fucking love this guy, because he's okay with making fun of himself. Because for that, if walking away from that interview, everybody was thinking, oh shit, they finally read Stephen Greenstreet's fucking article and all the stuff that he's been researching, because I believe they also linked it with the article, if I'm not mistaken, because they reference him in the article. So they link his work there. And and so my apologies, but I've not read your work. So when he sends Kirkpatrick an email saying, hey, look, have you read my work? I want to talk to you about these government employees convincing lawmakers to spend millions of dollars on a new version of OSAP, which is like, God, I've said that so many fucking, if somebody could go back and edit how many times I've said that exact sentence on this show, you'd have easily 150 times, easily. Like, it is so obvious what the hell's happening here now at this point, especially. But with Kirkpatrick, that interview made it seem like, yeah, Kirkpatrick was very much aware of Stephen Greenstreet's work and what he's done, but turns out he had no clue. But I think that should validate Greenstreet even more, because that means that two independent brains did the research. One had top secret clearance and the other did not. And they still came to the same conclusion, that this is a bunch of guys within government that believe in UFOs so hard. And it's gotten to a point, again, where it's influenced lawmakers. It's influenced scientists. I will say scientists because, I mean, with, you know, their name on a building at Stanford.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and you got to think too, on the other side of that is a lot of people were saying that Kirkpatrick had gotten the information from Greenstreet, which now shows that there's even more credence to the fact that Kirkpatrick actually did a true investigation into all of this, and he ended up the same place that Stephen Greenstreet ended up. Right? It's not, you know, you could say the same thing. So if anything, I would think that finds Kirkpatrick is even more credible, despite what all of the talking heads on UFO Twitter and the grifters like to say, that, you know, they're insinuating that, you know, he just read Greenstreet's, you know, report. But that wasn't the case. And you had, you know, you had one guy following documents and a legit trail that you would do in any investigation in our government, and then a guy who's not even in our government follow a different set of trails and just experiences and putting, you know, connecting the dots, and they all came to the same spot. That should give it credence even more. I mean, at this point, depending on what happens on this drop from Kirkpatrick and Arrow, the historical review or whatever, that might be, I'm serious, it could put a nail in the coffin as far as this whole disclosure thing, in my opinion.
If it gives the right information, I agree with you. Right. If there's no big black lines through a whole bunch of really, that turns out when it's FOIA, it turns out to just be a really simple shit like shapes.
Yeah.
Like it's gonna just fuel that conspiracy bullshit even more. But again, and I think we spoke about this last week when you were on, like, I think the military and the DOD partly take that to their advantage, that idea that people are going, oh my God, it's aliens. Oh my God, they're freaking out because they're so focused on the alien part of it, instead of going, oh shit, there's a huge national security risk here, or there's a huge issue with balloons in the atmosphere. Like thousands upon thousands are released every single day, you know, and and like every single night, and they look weird in our atmosphere, and people misreport them and misidentify them. And so, yeah,
it's important. It's important for stuff like that, especially on the political side. If you can find a way to take a heat off an issue that arose almost a year ago now, like the Chinese spy balloon, and then all of a sudden we found out, oh man, our sensors were not in tune. Like we weren't looking at the right things, and we had all of these things in our atmosphere over our airspace. Like, you know, why not let people just run with it? Right. Then you're not having to explain things. You know, then people are just like, we want disclosure. Tell us it's aliens. And they're over here, they're like, well, I'm glad they're not talking about, you know, adversarial tech flying around in our airspace or things like of that nature. Because then that puts pressure on politicians. When it comes to like aliens and disclosure and spacecraft, that's not really a lot of pressure on politicians, because in the hindsight of priorities on Capitol Hill, this is very, very low. So if they can keep them from talking about it, I see that being an advantage. So, you know, why not let them just talk?
I agree. And I think that's why I think the very last question that was asked to Kirkpatrick, I believe, on the show or on that podcast was, you know, the idea of, well, do you guys think this is doing more harm than good? You know, and they're like, oh, we discussed that ad nauseum within the office. But he didn't give a conclusion or sort of a resolution to that you know, intellectual discussion among, you know, peers. Okay, well, what are we doing here? Like, what are the social ramifications of people believing this shit? You know, and but I mean, because it's not just the public now it's law makers
Mhm.
in high positions that are believing this stuff and pushing it in very public and open ways in support of what the Soul Foundation has told them, in support of what Americans for Safe Aerospace has told them, in support of what Christopher Mellon and Lou Elizondo and whoever else was on the ATIP organization, including Alex Dietrich's husband. Like, you know, there's so many things that are just like red flags about this, but these
Right.
lawmakers are just uneducated on really who these people are, just like I kind of was until I educated myself, until I spent enough time with them and I saw enough shit where I was like, oh, this
Well,
is
you got to
bullshit.
you got to also realize is these lawmakers don't understand the history and the culture behind the UFO, since the 1940s, the
Right.
whole, and so, yeah, they don't have the time to sit there and dive in. Like I've been here for a year and I feel like I've done more reading than I ever have in my entire life. And it's just been trying to catch up on everything and see where the dots connect.
Yeah.
Catching up on all these personalities, all these different incidents, like who is saying what, and where are we at with this, and it took me a while. It really did. Like, and the more I read, obviously, the more like where I came over here, where you're at now, and I didn't talk to these people, right? I only
Right.
saw what everybody else was seeing, and I can only read what everybody else was reading. But it takes a lot of time to sit down and weed through it all. And politicians don't have time to do that. That's why you see them start talking about different aspects of it being angels and demons, because
Right.
it's a little bit easier to relate to that, especially if you're conservative politician, than it would be, taking time to look into the aliens. They don't know. Yeah, they hear about Jeremy Corbell, they hear about George Knapp, but do they really know the history of like everything they've put out and like the questionable stuff that, in the way they act when they get caught, with something that's potentially debunked?
Right.
They don't know any. They don't
And
know
just a
about
couple
that.
example 29 Palms,
Yeah.
the jellyfish UFO, element 115. I mean, the list goes on
Mhm.
and on and on. And every time
Yep.
you put the facts up, they get really pissy and they just ignore you, which is
Right.
hilarious. Real
And
quick, Greg O'Brien, thank you so much for the $10 donation. I genuinely appreciate it. And I also wanted to say, I have just recently stumbled because you were discussing about being able to consume everything and sort of connect those dots and sort of
mhm.
and I literally just found this girl because she subscribed to my channel, and the name of her channel is Weird Reads with Emily Louise, and I'm only 20 or 30 minutes into one video, and she's got a ton of content. And let me tell you something. This girl is everything I wish I was as a researcher. Man, she is doing insanely killer work. And I could just tell immediately off the bat that she's really done a killer job looking at all of the lore and the philosophy and the philosophizers and the people who started this stuff. And this goes back to the early 1900s when it really like the sort of like the pulp fiction of this started, being written down in comic books and being able to save media and library, like all of these things that she's connected beautifully through these presentations, man. Holy shit. Anyway, I don't mean to go off on a
No.
whole.
Send me a link to her profile
I
or whatever
will.
when you get a chance after this.
Yeah, let me you know what? I actually have her link right now. I'm gonna put it in the chat for everyone. So everyone in the chat can also go subscribe to her channel because yeah, she was insanely killer. Okay, so I want to go back real quick just to the Compass Rose and Charles McCullough. So if you had to take a guess, just based on what we discussed and all of the weirdness of this, like, do you really think it's, this idea that yes, Compass Rose is representing David Grusch, but they're doing it under the Soul Foundation umbrella. So technically speaking, every person under that umbrella is being sort of represented by Compass Rose? Or is it like what we were sort of discussing where the idea is Well, maybe just the website wasn't updated. Charles McCullough doesn't work for Compass Rose anymore, and he's on the Soul Foundation, and he's maybe legal advice. He's definitely the COO, right? Is that what we said? Or
Right.
is that
So yeah.
Grusch?
So Grush is the
Grusch is
chief
the
operating
COO. Yeah,
officer.
yeah,
Right. I think honestly, there would have been I think there would have been an announcement on Compass Rose's site
yeah,
if that was the case, because they seem to they document press releases, all of them, which
yeah,
is wild how they took them down. But real quick, Steve Long just messaged me and brought up something interesting. He
yeah.
said that you can still see the Compass Rose statement on the Wayback Machine. Now I've never used that, but he sent me screenshots and you can find it. It's
Yeah.
there. So it was there. It's
Yeah.
not there anymore.
Oh no, it
So
was definitely there. It was
yeah,
definitely there.
so it's interesting why that would be brought down. Now, I think it's important, obviously, to read that, or at least what I put in my posts, some interesting things about that, because I need people to understand. Like, there's a lot being said about the ICIG reprisal complaint and Compass Rose and urgent and credible and urgent and all of
Right.
these terms that you're hearing. It's getting washed over and over, and like people keep adding stuff in. But I do want to this right here is the most important information from that press release, and I think because you can't find it anymore, I think it's extremely important, and I'm going to read it. So in that statement, it says Compass Rose Legal Group has successfully concluded its representation of former client David Grusch on matters limited to his reasonable belief that elements of the intelligence community improperly withheld or concealed alleged classified information from U.S. Congress. All right. And you can kind of find that in the ICIG complaint. So it also states recent media articles misstate the scope of the firm's representation and include material misstatements of fact pertaining to our representation, which we have requested be corrected. So I haven't ever heard any corrections that have been made, to be honest. I mean, if they have been made, I haven't seen them or heard
Right.
about them. Now, the last part, which I think is extremely important, is the whistleblower disclosure did not speak to the specifics of the alleged classified information that Grusch has now publicly characterized, and the substance of that information has always been outside the scope of Compass Rose's representation. Compass Rose took no position and takes no position on the contents of the withheld information. So to me, what that told me is they has a specific scope of their complaint that they sent into the ICIG when they were representing Grusch. And if you go into Grusch's ICIG complaint, it talks about improper, basically like funding and reporting without oversight to about with involving special access programs. And he insinuates that they are UAP related, special access programs, but I don't think that there's any information that's going to come out that's going to support that. Now, there's an article I actually put out recently talking about there's going to be coming up soon. They're actually going to be disclosing information and declassifying information about certain special access programs related to space programs, right? And that was put out by space.com. So I think what we're going to be seeing here, and this is why the House Oversight Committee or the Congressional Oversight Committee, I believe it is, with Tim Burchett, Anna Paulina, Ogles, all of them, that's why they would be involved with this, because they are their scope is literally illegal funding, laundering, stuff of that nature, involving taxpayer dollars. That's why they talk about Hunter Biden and President Biden all the time, especially because they're conservatives. That is what they focus on, and that would make sense also in the ICIG, because if you look at Monheim's page, who is the ICIG, the Inspector General, it goes over fraud, waste, and abuse, and that's their target, that's their focus on investigations like this. So when you boil it down, and especially with Compass Rose's statement, it's pretty specific. It has nothing to do with aliens, has nothing to do with spacecraft, anything of that. It's not mentioned. That is not mentioned in any of that the complaint on both the ICIG and the Compass Rose statement. So people are insinuating and speculating that it has something to do with reverse engineer programs and crash retrieval programs. But all it says is just UAP related programs. That's it. That could, and we know that there's been, when UAP fly over, and we don't, as you saw in the DoD IG report, they don't. There's nothing in there about NHI or alien or anything like that. Yes, they're going to have a team, or they're going to have somebody in place to recover any kind of down adversarial tech, and they're going to examine that because they have to do that. They need to know what data they collected and how they did that. So I think what you're seeing is there's a potential here that David Grusch, in his positions that he was in, he, being a believer, thought he might have stumbled on to something that might have been UAP related. But chances are these are just special access programs that he didn't have access to. And he got reprisals for digging into this stuff when he shouldn't have been. And I think that's what this all is going to boil down to.
Right.
So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Ooh. Well, I mean, I think, I wonder if he's got a leg on the stand, or leg to stand on when it comes to the actual reprisals. I mean, if these reprisals are coming on him because he's digging in and trying to find this UFO truth on his spare time or on actual work time, like, maybe they're like, oh man, we gotta start worrying about Dave, like,
Right.
like what
Well,
do we do? Like, he's in a position where, he's gone through all this training, he's been certified, he's supposed to be the cream of the crop, so to speak. And then you find this side of him. Like, where does this come from? Like, how did this slip through the cracks?
well, I find it pretty interesting too. I think so. This might not be the same interview, but if you go on the ICIG complaint and you look on number 4 there, item 4, whatever you want to call it, it says in July 2021, Mr. Grush confidentially provided UAP related classified information to the DoD IG. The Inspector General, that, Greenwald's FOIA, the big discussion about the 15 years studying UFO. If you look at that, it also says July 2021 with the Department of Defense Inspector General. I wonder if that's actually the same interview that was conducted where Grush supposedly gave that information, but what Greenwald got was just the unclassified version of that interview, and the classified version is part of that same interview, but that's only for the ICIG to see. Because what they're both in July 2021. How many times was he meeting with the DoD Inspector General talking about UFOs and UAP? You know
Right.
what I mean? Like, you kind of have to narrow that down a little bit. So that's kind of interesting too. Like, I wonder if that interview is actually where he supposedly disclosed that information, and then he started receiving what he called reprisals. Supposedly followed, per the ICIG complaint, followed that interview. So to me, I mean, if it's July 2021 and we go to Grush's resume, so July 2021, he actually would have been with the NRO and not the NGA.
Hmm.
But on the ICIG complaint, it says the NGA.
Right.
So I'm really confused on what happened there. I wonder if as soon as he got with the NGA, he got, supposedly that's when he was walked out in 2022.
Right.
Something, I'm telling you, there is a window
Yeah.
there where something has happened,
Yeah.
and that would explain the reprisals.
Right.
So,
Well, I'm also curious because they have, the one person's name that has come out as far as reprisals is concerned is Gary Reed. And we also discussed him last week. Like, oh God, like,
if there's one
what
guy I could
does,
interview,
yeah, what does Gary Reed
period.
know? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, like, so I'm, I wonder if Gary Reed himself has put in a complaint on either David Grush or Lou Elizondo or any one of these guys that have put his name out there publicly. I wonder, has anybody FOIA'd that?
I don't know. I mean, we know John. He does a lot.
John
He does a
Greenwald,
lot.
have you foiled
Yeah.
that?
I don't know if he's in
Because
the chat. I can't see, but yeah,
yeah,
that would be. I mean, if there's one interview with one person that could potentially bring a lot of this stuff crashing down,
yeah,
it would be with Gary Reed and what took place and why he had the Air Force OSI look into Luis Elizondo. I mean, we know the FOIA documents are there. I posted them the other day about Elizondo's resignation, his 3 resignation letters or reasons for what he did. But there's something there, man, and that guy's off the radar, or at least I haven't looked into it. But that'd be the one guy I'd be interested in talking to, because then you can start to paint a picture. In
yeah.
my like,
Well,
you know what I mean?
well, do you? I mean, like, look, I mean, just logically thinking about it, if someone's gonna put an ICIG complaint in on you,
Mhm.
wouldn't you also put one in on him if you think he's lying about you or representing you incorrectly?
Well, yeah, I mean, you would think,
You
right?
would
I
think,
mean,
right?
so yeah, I mean, that's the whole point of the ICIG, the Inspector General for the intelligence community. It's the HR, right? So
Right,
if you're experiencing like any kind of sexual harassment,
right.
racism, things of that nature, that's the place you're going to do. You're going to file that complaint,
Yeah,
and we know Carl Nell knows all about that. So we know how that kind of works. So yeah, I mean, you would think that even somebody would feel that, but something came up with Gary Reed that took he obviously had to step down or whatever happened there. That's before my time. That's why I'm trying to put together a timeline,
yeah.
because for somebody that's only been here a year, going back to when stuff started occurring is gonna, I think, help me paint a better picture, because I have serious doubts about all of this, and I was a believer at one point like you.
Yeah, well, that's one I'd really like to dive into. And if I'm not mistaken, I mean, this happened now a couple of years ago, but if I'm not mistaken, also the female, the lady who was attached to the sort of the harassment claims, if I'm not mistaken, her name might have come out as well.
Oh yeah, it's out. Yeah, I
Yeah,
can't remember her name to save my life.
yeah, but
But
those
yeah,
are the two people. So I want to just correct myself because I was saying Gary Reed was the only, but she would then also be the second. But again, I'm not sure if she's countered, doing the complaint, against either Grush or Elizondo or Breed. Like it's. I said a long time ago that a lot of this has sort of the stench of being a very tense office fight.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it seems like a turf war,
Yeah,
right? Like,
big time.
who's going to be the big dog to get us to disclosure? That's where I feel like we're heading, and you're seeing people jockeying, right? And one person that's got his hand in everything. Well, 2 people, Christopher Mellon and Gary Nolan,
Yeah,
they have got their hand in every single little pot,
yeah,
right? And like I explained to somebody earlier, I really think this is a Trojan horse of outsiders trying to gain access to the inside,
mm,
to try to collect UAP and UFO reports, to do to get to the next level of trying to get what they think is disclosure. I
right.
think it's what's happening, and that's why you're seeing all these different foundations and everything pop up at the same time. They're capitalizing on what's being talked about with Grush, which in hindsight really isn't a pressing issue. I'll be honest with you, I think it's probably going to start falling a little flat with the election year and everything that's coming
Yep.
up, and
Oh
then you
yeah,
have what's
this
going
is not
on.
an election issue by any
No,
stretch of the
no, people
imagination.
don't care about that right now. We just
No.
had 3 soldiers die. Like, you know
Yeah,
what I mean? Like, there
yeah,
is a
yeah.
priority list, and
Right.
it just went all the way down.
All the way down.
So,
Yep.
yeah. So, but like I said, there is a Trojan horse occurring of outsiders trying to gain access on the inside, and we're seeing it. And I'm working on that as well.
Yeah. Real quick, Greg O'Brien with a $5 donation said, "Word on the street is you can find Reed in the Pentagon parking lot." Yeah. I wonder if it's well, no, that was an EG&G parking lot where Wilson Davis notes went down. But there was also something here from B Baker that caught my eye.
Uh-huh.
That she had said about DJ. and I was just wondering if she meant the DJ from Calling All Beings, because that's a guy that really sort of has my attention as far as one of sort of the attack dogs. If you say anything against Lou Elizondo, he would be one of the first phone calls that I would always get, and we'd sit there and we'd have these conversations, and I thought for a little while I was kind of getting through, but then yeah, then one day he just started seriously bad mouthing me behind my back. Trying to look for this comment. Sorry.
Oh, you're good. I can't even see any of the comments. So
Yeah, I know. Sorry about that. I don't have you
oh,
in an
you're fine.
actual
You're
live
fine.
room. But yeah. Oh gosh, where is it, B Baker? Why am I missing it?
Sometimes when you look for something so hard, you just look right over it.
I know, man. And also my eyes are just going bad, which is not fun. Damn. Feel like. Anyway, maybe she'll comment again. If you could throw that comment in there again, be bigger, I'd appreciate it. Okay, so yeah, I mean, it just seems like you said, there's just something's not right. Something's not lining up. Something's rotten in Denmark, as they say.
Yeah, it's
Right? Is that the saying? Yeah, I believe it is.
yeah, I mean, you can kind of see it. I mean, if people were presented the same things that we present and say, "Hey, look at this," you know what I
Right.
mean? About the only thing that people will ever argue with is, well, what about all the experiencers and people that have, had these up close experiences and stuff like that? You push that aside, and really, I don't see that there's any traction with this. It was hot on the iron when Grush came out, and then they had the congressional hearing. To be honest,
I
there
would
just
disagree with
hasn't
you
been
there. I
traction.
don't think it was hot on the iron for shit. I think it was a blip on the actual mainstream media. The only people who really
Right.
picked it up were Yes Theory and News Nation and a couple hits here and there on other mainstream channels. But I mean, I was making fun of it. I was mocking it. There were pictures of the congressional hearing. There were, I think, 6 reporters in front of Grush taking pictures. Like, I mean, you've seen way more media
Oh
interests
yeah.
in other congressional hearings that have nothing to do with UFOs. They're like corporate espionage or whatever. And you'll get that room is packed with lawmakers and journalists that are trying to get a great picture of the scoop. So
Yeah.
like there was 6 at Grush and David Fravor and the old George Knapp and Corbell,
Right. Well,
hearing.
what I mean is, with the congressional hearing, you had people back there that are pretty popular. You even had Sean Ryan back there, right? He was
Was he
there.
back there?
Sean
I
Ryan was
missed that
there.
one.
Yeah.
He's those. Here's somebody that I think we should start talking about, because now I'm seeing him pop up in a lot of weird places that
Mhm.
I never thought this guy would pop up, and that is Billy Carson. He did Sean Ryan's, and now he was on the Danny Jones podcast. And it's like, whoa, dude, Billy Carson? Like, we're taking Billy Carson seriously now.
I don't even know who that is, just to be honest.
Oh man, that is
Like Chris
a grifter
Bledsoe,
number
and
one, dude.
I have
Like
no idea who these people are
Chris
popping up.
He's like Chris Bledsoe with a $4,000 suit.
Okay.
Like this
Well,
guy
there you
is
go.
actually, if I'm not mistaken, he definitely has a criminal record of some kind of fraud in Florida, if I'm not mistaken. Some kind of just like, it's just scamming people kind of thing. And he's got that Forbidden Knowledge channel. He does a lot of hits with Jimmy Church and the Gaia Network, and the things this guy is saying, man, on I don't know how to label the Sean Ryan podcast.
It's it's I mean, he really talks about a lot of military, and he has a lot of military intelligence and those people on.
Yeah.
Because I'll be honest, when I was on TikTok, somebody that used to work with him actually reached out to me,
Yeah.
and I was like, and it was right before Greer came on, and that's when it all kicked off. That's when she told me he was trying to branch out. They were trying to take the show out and branch it out. And I
Yeah.
guess he had started getting interested in this topic, and that's when immediately he had Dr. Greer on, and they just opened the flood. He had like
Right.
different whistleblowers on, some dude from Antarctica who
Yeah, well,
claimed that
this guy, yeah, well, that's the guy that Greer whipped out in his press conference after the congressional hearing. The guy from Antarctica, the total kook. Billy Carson, if I'm not mistaken, spoke at that press conference, and Billy Carson is like one of Greer's best buddies. They are like fucking scam arty, high five, like Kobe, just they are, and they do it in a way because I think or at least for me, they're not on social media a lot. They don't put their opinions out there. They don't sort of throw their 2 cents into the thing. So they get away with so much shit. Like,
that's smart.
That's why Stephen Greer has such a crazy audience, because if he did engage with the murder board, like, he would be picked apart so quickly. Same thing with Corbell, same thing with Knapp. Like, these guys are very careful with who they talk to, and sort of who they interact with. But yeah, like Billy Carson and Stephen Greer really don't do anything on social media. They have, I know for sure Carson has like a handle, but dude, like, does not interact with anyone. I
think that works in their favor, right?
For sure.
And when the least that you interact, the more that the questions are left out there, and there's still this air of kind of mystique, like is it real or is it not? Unlike Jeremy Corbell, who is very active on Twitter, and he gets called out, and we every time he drops a UFO drop, I mean, people are on it within hours, open source, people are just debunking. And
he never responds to it directly.
He did to me one time.
Did he?
Yeah, but this was earlier when I was back on Twitter. He did. And I think there was a time where George Knapp, he blocked me. Corbell hasn't, though, which is odd. I can't get Corbell to block
Knapp
me.
And Corbell have not blocked. Well, I think that's the move, right? Like, the move is you don't block, because the more people that you have following you and interacting with you, the more you flow into the algorithm. And
what is it? Negative press is still better than no press type thing, right?
Exactly. So, and then don't really interact with it or spar with the intellectual end of it, so that way you don't expose yourself. And then you do it through people like Chris Sharp, or whoever, like,
super accurate factual information
UFO
found in this
Joe,
article.
Yeah, exactly. UFO Joe, and like his young guns of ufology, like he tells them, yo man, this is what's happening. I'm telling you, man, it's the best thing since sliced bread. This new thing I'm dropping, and they get super excited. They can't wait, and then they think they're friends with him. And then when he drops this bullshit, they know it's terrible, especially Danny Silva. Like, that guy at this point, you could tell he knows.
You start to see him. Yeah, he's kind of, I don't know him very well, but I see his tweets, and he's kind of like tiptoeing on, like, I think we're tired of the whole grainy UFO drops. Like, come on,
dude, he's sick of it. He's sick of it, but
everybody should be.
He'll never call out Corbell by name. He'll never say this isn't good enough, man. And so that's where, like, it's like, shit, like, what's the point of being a voice in this discussion if you're not going to hold all of the information that comes to the table over the fire?
Yeah, you got it. Yeah, you got to meet it with skepticism, and you also have to set the standard of evidence at a high bar. Like, that's another thing that has plagued this community, and people talk about stigma. Well, I mean, if you just accept all of these, like, especially what Corbell's put out, like, sometimes they look a little odd at the beginning, but that's why you should probably look into, like, this might be something that could be explainable. And when you have that bar so low, then you have everybody thinking that this thing is something real, that this phenomenon is real. And then you have the people on the outside looking in like, bro, like this is not what you think it is. And that creates that stigma that everybody talks about so much.
Yeah.
It's crazy to me. But I did want to touch on, like, I thought it was interesting. We talk about who's active and who's not on Twitter and how it works in their advantage, or X. And it's weird. You're starting to see people lash out, like Christopher Mellon, who is notorious for, he'll put out something, but he doesn't really interact. And you saw what happened, a few days ago, and he actually blocked me, which was odd. I mean, all I did was just ask questions. And, he said, I don't know how the world works. And he might be right, because I wasn't born with money in my pocket, for sure. So if you're talking from that aspect, I wouldn't know.
Right.
But I know how to come from a very blue collar nothing to where we're at now. So I don't know. Maybe we have different perspectives. And all his fans, they said that was a gotcha moment, which good for him. He's got way more fans than I do. So of course they're going to say that. And that's what Greenwald brought up too.
Okay, so thanks, Greg O'Brien, for rewriting this comment from B. Baker. God, I cannot find it. But are you caught up to the dark journalist claims about David Grusch?
I saw that he put out some statements today. I think he was either reacting to Mellon and Greenwald.
Yeah.
I messaged him, and he sent one or two messages back where we both got blocked by Mellon, or that Mellon had talked to us, and then we both got blocked by him. So, but I don't think I've caught up completely now.
Well, okay, so he was. Well, I think that's basically it, right? Is that he spoke with Grusch for 3 hours, and in this conversation, he had mentioned something about David Grusch facing reprisals if he had spoken or gone on the record with either who was it, with him, I believe, with dark journalists. But B. Baker is also saying that dark journalist said about his phone call that was interesting was Grusch was afraid of Mellon because of reprisal for talking to DJ. Okay, so DJ's dark journalist. Okay, I thought that was DJ.
Yeah, I was wondering who you were talking about.
Did you think that was DJ from Calling All Beans?
I don't listen to the podcast, so I didn't know who DJ was to begin with, to be honest with you.
Okay, so DJ is a former Air Force. He's a veteran, one of these veterans that is bootlicker for Lou Elizondo, and he was one of these guys that was spearheading the anti-UCR. Anytime somebody agreed to come on my show, he would contact them and be like, don't go on their show. This guy's he's an enemy of Lou, yada 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 yada. And this is a guy that before I helped him pick the name of his show. You know what I mean? I would these guys. I knew all of these guys, and they were all my buddies. And the second I start questioning the Messiah, all of a sudden they flip a switch and they're no longer my buddies, because I'm like, oh, this is bullshit. As far as I can see, especially the people that are spreading this information. So, so at the end of the day, what do you think is going to come of this McCullough Grusch connection? Do you think it's going to fall flat, like you said?
The best thing that can happen is they come back and say, yeah, we found, while there's some confusion, and Tim Burchett and Anna Paulina, they spoke about this on Tim Burchett's recent podcast, is they apparently had a government witness who I guess saw a UFO. And he came into the skiff and told a story. Now, I only know that because Burchett said that on his podcast. He let that out there. I don't know if anybody caught it. I posted the video, but he explained that somebody had called him.
When did you post that video, by the way? Sorry to interrupt.
Let's see. It was, I'd have to go back.
Did you tag Burchett in there?
I did. Okay. Yeah, I had to, because it was his podcast.
Got it. Okay. I'll see if I can find it.
Yeah, you should. If you just go on YouTube, it should pop up if you type in his podcast, it's, but anyways, he talked